see a presentation. We're going to discuss the challenge process that is upcoming for the Broadband Equity Access and Development Program. Today, as Nicole just mentioned, it is being recorded so that if there are peers of yours, colleagues who were not able to attend when we've conducted all four of these sessions, this is the third of four we're having, we will post all the links on our website at broadband.nd.gov. So people who were not able to join the call today can see it, or you can go back and review it. We are conducting these calls for different stakeholder groups who can participate in the challenge process. So we've already conducted one for the carriers in the state of North Dakota. We've conducted one for tribal governments. This one today is for local governments, and then we have one more that we'll do for nonprofit organizations. They're pretty much the same. We had about 40 carriers on the call. We had about 10 members of the tribal community governments on the call last week. Glad to see some people here today. We really will be able to answer questions you have. So if you, throughout the time, raise your hand through Teams or put it in chat, what we'll do is we'll plan to answer those questions at the end. Today, we're going to have an overview of the process itself, joined by members of Guidehouse, which is the consultant group that's been leading this charge for us. And then we'll hand it over to an organization called Ready. That's the platform that we are using for the challenge process. And they will go over the kind of the nuts and bolts of what to expect when we start this. We are awaiting approval by the NTIA to begin the process. So we believe that it could come within any week. We were hoping to be able to start March 1, but we're going to probably start sometime in the middle of March. We don't know yet. So here's the agenda today. We'll cover the program, challenge process, registration, and challenge submission walkthrough, and then we'll collect any questions you've had throughout the time and attempt to answer all of those. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mary from Guidehouse to take us through the next step.
Thanks, Brian. So as mentioned, what we'll walk through first is a brief overview of the BEAD program and the challenge process, and then we'll hand it over to Shane from ReadyNet, who will do a live demo of registration and challenge submission. So Nicole, I think you can take us to the next slide. Quick overview of the BEAD program itself. So BEAD has provided $42 billion in funding to eligible entities with the intention of expanding access to high-speed internet. So the program itself funds a number of different activities ranging from planning to deployment to mapping and adoption. And as we think about the relative prioritization of the program, the focus is really on the deployment or the infrastructure piece. So states themselves will first be required to fund service to unserved and underserved locations. After these locations have been addressed, the state can then fund deployment to community anchor institutions that lack gigabit level service. Once all unserved and underserved locations and community anchor institutions have been addressed, at that point, the state can then support digital equity related programs or initiatives should funding remain at that point. So this might include anything related to affordability, to adoption, to digital skill building. So in terms of the process itself, looking out to the next year or so, it's really bucketed into four main categories. As Brian mentioned, at this point, the state has submitted to the NTIA its initial proposal for review and approval. Once the NTIA approves initial proposal volume 1, this will give the state the ability to kickstart or initiate its challenge process. The challenge process itself will comprise of three main phases, which Jason will walk through in a bit here. It'll be about a 100-day process, which will take us to the summer of 2024. At that point, once the challenge process is concluded, the BEAD eligible locations are determined. Subgrantee selection will run from the summer to the fall. And then finally, near the end of the year, the state will be documenting findings from challenge process, subgrantee selection, including award determinations. And we'll be documenting this in the final proposal, which will be submitted to the NTIA for review and approval. On the next slide, what we'll take a look at is an overview of the challenge process. Nicole, I think you can advance us. So in terms of the intention of the challenge process, the idea here is to get at that final list of BEAD eligible locations. So the challenge process will only allow from challenges from eligible organizations, including nonprofit organizations, units of local and tribal governments, and broadband service providers. At a very high level, these challengers are able to challenge a determination made by the state in terms of whether a certain location is or is not eligible to receive BEAD funds. There are a few pre-identified allowable challenge categories, which we've listed on the right. So this might include an availability challenge if the organization is aware that broadband service is not offered at that location, technical features ranging from speed, data caps, and latency. Technology type, so if the challenger is aware that the listed technology for that location is not accurate. Business service, if that location is a residential location, but the marketed service is only a business service. CAI eligibility determinations, this can go either way, whether a CAI has been erroneously included in the list and should be removed, or if there is a CAI that was excluded and should be added to the list. Enforceable commitments, so if the challenger is aware that the location will receive broadband service through a federal obligation such as CAF or Reconnect. And then finally, planned service outside of enforceable commitments, whether the challenger is aware that broadband will be deployed to that location by June of 2024. In terms of unallowable challenges, we are not able to accept challenges that will alter the BSL classifications. This challenge type would need to be run through the FCC challenge process. So I'll kick it to Jason, who's going to give us an overview of the challenge process itself, the distinct phases, and the timeline for that.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Now, we anticipate the challenge period to begin next month and run through the summer, as Mary had mentioned, with the exact dates to be announced following the conclusion of the NTIA's final round of curing for North Dakota's initial proposal, Volume 1. Prior to the beginning of the challenge process, all eligible entities must pre-register for approved access to the challenge portal. We will go into additional detail during our demo on what information will be required for you all to submit when you register. We'll also be circulating this information prior to the beginning of the challenge process. Getting to the challenge process itself, the first phase will be the challenge period. During this phase, challengers will have 30 days to submit one or more challenges through the portal. If necessary, this period will be extended by an additional 15 days to allow adequate time for all challenges to be submitted. This is an optional phase, so the state may elect to keep it at the 30-day window, but should we determine it's necessary, that could be extended. Following that, the rebuttal phase is going to run concurrently with the challenge period. During this phase, providers will have 30 days from the notification of a challenge to provide rebuttal to their submitted challenge. This 30-day window is triggered with each challenge that is submitted. So whether that's the first day or the last day of the challenge period, that timeline of 30 days for rebuttal does not begin until a particular challenge has been submitted. At the end of the rebuttable period, the state will begin its final determination phase. While the reviews of submitted challenges and rebuttals will be running concurrently with both the challenge phase and the rebuttal period, final determinations will take place over a 30-day period following the end of the rebuttal phase. If necessary, the final determination phase will also be extended by an additional 15 days to allow the state additional time to thoroughly adjudicate any and all challenges. We'll be able to get into more questions at the end of this. If in the meantime, however, you have any, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll open up in the Q&A at the end of this discussion. But with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Shane at ReadyNet, and he's going to walk through the challenge process portal and what you can expect.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Is everyone able to see my screen? Cool.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, thank you. So this is the North Dakota Bead Challenge portal registration site. So on here, you'll be able to see, a few things, some of the information about the challenge process. So there's an introduction, program overview, goes into a little bit of the challenge categories and types. But really where you want to focus your attention is over here on the register button. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. You'll then fill this out. So I'm just going to go ahead and type my name here. In your case, you'd put your entity name and entity website. And then once that's done, you would select what type of organization you are. In this case, local government. Type in your EIN. I'm making mine up. And then type in your address. All right, and then at the bottom, there's just two areas where you can then upload documentation. That way you'll be able to show any registration with the North Dakota Secretary State Office and any documentation to validate your organization's identity. You will then click finish and you'll get an email, and that will put you into a queue for North Dakota to go and look and then approve you as eligible for the challenge process. When that happens, you will get a secondary email that will have what we call a magic link. You'll click that magic link and you'll be directed into the challenge portal, which is what I'm going to show you now. So again, once you click that magic link, you'll end up in this portal. So this is where the challenge process takes place. Your dashboard will be blank. I have a few challenges I already created from other demos and testing and such that you can see down here. So that's your dashboard. The other important thing to note on this page is the challenge map. So in the challenge map, you'll be able to see a map of North Dakota and all the various BSLs as well as their status. We have a few different options for interacting with this map and really gleaning information from it. So number one is you can come in here and create various zones. So there's two ways to do that. You can either, let me go ahead and just write the zone name. All right, so you can either upload a shapefile to have the zones come in if you already have that, or you can draw them on the map using the polygon tool. So I will just quickly demonstrate that. All right, and then I can save it, and then you can see I have that zone here saved. And now what that allows you to do is basically toggle on and off zone boundaries to be able to look at the map in a little cleaner way. And then we have a whole bunch of other layers that you can turn on and off. You can look either by performance category, building type, community anchor institution, unit count. Is the location a CAI or is it not? And then you can also look at areas that have already been funded, what technology is being used, what service providers provide for that location. You can look with the census block groups on or off, which I currently have on. And at the bottom, you have 4 different ways to view the map, either satellite, light, terrain, or dark mode, which I prefer dark mode. So we'll look at it that way. Now, when you find a location you want to make a challenge for, or if you already know, there's 2 ways to create a challenge. You can see up here in the upper right, the add challenge button, or also from the dashboard, we have an add challenge button there as well. So I'm going to assume that people are on the map when they're making challenges. So I will go ahead and click add challenge. So from here, you can see the different challenge categories that we have. And these are also listed on that registration site as well. I'm going to go ahead and click provider service level for options of this demo. And I'm going to click availability type. So report service is not available. No, it's not a multi-dwelling unit challenge. All right, and then I'm going to add details about my specific challenge. So I'm just going to go ahead and say the provider does not offer the technology entered at this location. I will say it's CenturyLink and copper wire. So now you can see all the points that have CenturyLink and copper wire. Locations are available on the map. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Now there's two ways to add points to a challenge. You can either, three ways. You can either select them individually or upload them or select an area. So if I shift and drag, and I'll do that again, you can see I'm selecting numerous points. I'm going to go ahead and confirm there. But again, you can also upload a list of locations or just click on them individually and click add to challenge. So I'm going to go ahead here and click next. And here you can see that you're required to add some documentation and evidence for the challenge. We have a spreadsheet, so you can go ahead and download this and put your evidence in there. And I actually already have some evidence files created. I'm going to go ahead and upload those. Click next. And finally, just an attestation that everything is correct. And you can go ahead and submit the challenge. So once that's done, it sends you back to the map. You can see this is the latest challenge I made on the 27th. It's also here on the dashboard. And here's where you can view all your challenges once you make them, if there's multiple. Just some information about them, how many locations, what's the status. So yeah, that's basically how to register and how to make a challenge. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Shane. Appreciate that. So with regard to next steps, the immediate next step will be to complete the registration. This will be opening prior to the challenge period. You will all receive an email once approved that will review applicants, approve those. This will be the magic link that Shane referred to. So once you complete your pre-registration, we'll review those, approve those, you'll receive one more notification and a link to log into the site and then complete your profile. We'll also be sending out review challenge process materials. In the coming days, we'll be sending that out to all of you in preparation for this process. This will include a guide for navigating the challenge portal, as well as the materials regarding everything you heard here today on timelines, challenge types, permissible evidence, etc. Another big item for registration is the requesting a CostQuest license for local government, tribal government, nonprofits. That will be a Tier E license. The request form can be found on CostQuest website. For ISPs, they will need to register for a Tier D license. The information on which entities need to apply for which tier of license is available both on the FCC and CostQuest websites, but we'll also include this in the information we circulate for your review. After that, it's the kickoff of the challenge period. During this time, we'll want everyone to submit their permissible challenges. We anticipate this starting next month with an official start date to be announced following the conclusion of the final round of NTIA curing. And with that, we'll open up to any discussions that you may all have. Feel free to raise your hand, drop a question in the chat. Happy to answer those questions.
Thank you, Jason. While we're looking for that, I want to stress a couple things. That one is that this is all new for us. And so, that we don't have the ability to rely on how we've done it before. And that's why we're using ReadyNet as a company, because they've done this. They're doing this for about at least 15 states that I'm aware of. And I also want to kind of say that, there's no group that's more important and probably the lift no bigger than local government. And that's because there's only 4 groups that are allowed to provide challenges. And as we've said, carriers, tribal governments, local governments are also nonprofits. So as local governments, you're the focal point for your citizens if they have concerns about speed. And the purpose of this in the end is to get to a place where we know exactly how many locations we're going to be able to have available for the BEAD funding process. So one thing I would recommend, because we have this time, is before we start the process, is either in your committee meeting, opening comments, maybe public comments. I would recommend that you use that time to maybe in a public meeting say, hey, there's this process going on. If people have concerns about the speed of their internet service, to let someone at your government know. And I would designate in that time maybe your city or county auditor. And then basically that would be the first starting point so that you could begin to gather those. And again, because this is all new, if you have questions when we get farther along, please, we'll do everything we can to kind of help you through it. But I think the lift is bigger for local governments than anybody else. So I know, Matt, you have a question, so we'll kind of stop there, but I wanted to give that preamble.
Right. Well, yeah, thank you, Brian. And maybe you and I, Brian, should have an offline conversation, but this is definitely something we should be informing our members about. I know earlier this year, and maybe it's a separate project, but I visited with a group of individuals with a corporate company about how I felt internet speeds were in our communities and what we're hearing and that sort of information. And that was really, I would say, more broad anecdotal information. We don't do polling or surveys on data speeds. But this is definitely some information I think that needs to get out to the cities, and those are my members. I'm with the League of Cities, so we have access to all 355 cities in the state. So I feel like a request of mine would be, if there's a one pager or some information that I could share about this process, and then just be brought up to speed of how I can be helpful if we get calls. And I wouldn't say this is new to me, but I feel kind of like you, Brian, this is sort of new to me. So, but it seems like it's something that's important, and maybe communities are sitting out there thinking, oh, all of our residents are good with internet speeds, but I bet that's not the case. So I'm just sitting here thinking, how can we educate our members? So I'm open to any suggestions.
Totally. And thanks, Matt, for offering to pass along this info. What I would recommend is, as mentioned at the top of this call, once we've done all 4 of these info sessions, Brian's going to be sharing an email that provides a recap of next steps, helpful links, tips and tricks, where you can register the CostQuest licenses, where registration can be completed, FAQs. So essentially a one-stop shop for anything challenge process related. What we'll ask is if you can pass that along to any relevant organizations in your community. And then, of course, if there are any questions, you're welcome to direct that to the email that's listed at the bottom of this slide.
And I guess also, I think, we had developed a one pager that kind of just said the process was coming. I think we could send that again. It basically sums up some of this at a very high level. And Matt, yeah, I think what we could also do is have a call. Probably what we'd probably do is have the Guidehouse team and me on a call, and we could just talk through whatever you think we need to do to get to your members. I don't know if you have a regular, like a monthly call with any of your members, like cities, or if you do, that might be an ideal way to kind of hit this a second time. But anything we can do, because I believe this is untapped. This is very important, and it's a big thing.
Right. And I think there needs to be a touch point more than a toolkit. Brian understands the scope of North Dakota. 355 cities, 307 are under 1,000 population. So their sophistication, I would say, their abilities at the local level to lead an effort like this are going to be pretty limited. So it's anything, from meeting audit requirements to whatever. We just face challenges with our very small rural communities. And when it comes to broadband, they're probably the ones that need the most connectivity. So we just need to make sure we're thinking about that. And Brian, to your point, we have a magazine that goes out monthly. We do a weekly e-newsletter, but we do a monthly webinar. We call it a webinar, but we just pick a topic. So this could easily be a topic that people could dial in on and listen as well. So I think we have some opportunities to communicate.
I think if you're okay with that, that monthly webinar would be an ideal thing, and we could cover this more. And I get the number of cities, and we've reached out also to the Association of Counties, and I don't know if there's a way to try and funnel up with the cities into the counties so that maybe they, and then you're just at 53. Because it is onerous, this whole thing, getting a license and all that. A lot of cities are going to say that's just too much. But maybe if you can kind of funnel back up to the county and have them do it, that might be a way. I'm just trying to think about the most efficient, because there's a clock running once we start this that makes it even more complicated. I think also there's a question from Steve Larson, and maybe Mary, let you take that and answer his question in the chat.
Yeah, so a couple questions from Steve. I think the first is for the definitions of broadband serviceable locations, community anchor institutions. Went ahead and dropped those in the chat, but just for everyone online, BSL stands for broadband serviceable locations. These are all locations identified in the FCC fabric data. CAIs are community anchor institutions. These are defined more explicitly in the BEAD guidance, but those are generally going to be schools, libraries, community centers, similar organizations that are, again, anchors of the community. For your question regarding townships that do not have a website, that's something that I think is a good question. Shane and or Brian, if you have thoughts on that, happy to hear those. But also if you'd like to expand on that question a bit, Steve, happy to dig into that a bit more.
Yes,
Yeah, for that, I would honestly, I would just put something in there. It could be as simple as, I don't know, it doesn't have to be a site that exists. It's just something that we are capturing. So similar to how I just did my name, shanelayton.com, you could go ahead and put something in there that was similar. If you do not have a website, that would be my guidance.
Great. And then regarding your second question, Steve, for an address that a township should use, whether that's an officer's address or what location should get put in there for the registration point, Shane, if you want to speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I would just use whatever address that you get mail sent to that's for the township. That would be, yeah, my guidance there.
Okay, any additional questions on those, Steve?
So we have similar types of questions that Matt had for the small cities. So we have townships that are just a handful of folks. Sometimes 5, 10, 15 folks almost. And that's several square miles. And so getting this type of information out to those very rural areas, again, which are more than the more likely cases where communications would be limited, is probably going to be a big challenge. So the townships do have a monthly newsletter that goes out. Not all townships have that, but that is available to get to some of them anyway.
So part of the purpose of this, as I said, or really the main purpose, is to take the 6,000 or so locations that we believe are either unserved or underserved, and then have organizations take a look at all the locations in the state, and determine or say, hey, we don't believe this one is is meeting those speed requirements, or you have one that says it's unserved or underserved, but it's actually good, and here's how we can provide data to support that. So quite likely, I mean, just having the access and looking at the map will help some of your communities know if this is even a thing or not, you know, and because I wouldn't make the assumption that it's rural and the most rural areas don't have it. That could be, but it may not be. I expect that we'll see a lot of challenges in more of the more populated areas actually in North Dakota than in the rural areas, but don't know that for sure. So in the end, though, if the group that's kind of left out of this by law is the end user. And so the only way the end user, if they have some data to support why they're not getting a speed, is through one of these other organizations. And the best one for them is the government, the local governments. And so we agree this is kind of a disconnect because you've got to get people up to speed very quickly in a time frame that's not really conducive to that, in order to have them help individuals who don't even know this is going on. So we understand that there's a process here that may not catch everybody, but we want to do anything we can to help you.
Yeah, in our township, which is probably one of the more populous townships in the state, I know there are some areas that don't have network connection right now. So, and we're right next to Fargo and West Fargo.
And that's kind of where I would expect we'll see a lot of the challenges. The key thing with the challenge is it puts the onus on the provider to then come back, and then they'll come back with data speeds. They'll come back with information that we either have to say is valid or not. And but the more documentation any of your challenges can have, if an end user can do data speeds and do screenshots and that kind of stuff, that would be the type of evidence that would be good to present if someone's saying that they're not getting the speed. So it's one thing to not have service at all, but if they believe that their speed is not as advertised, being able to do some speed tests and screenshots to show that is good, because then you can present that as a government and to a particular location, and then force the provider to respond to that. That's what this process would help do. The biggest hurdle here is getting the word out and having, it's an education thing. It's just by nature of how this is, it's just going to be it's just super hard. It's hardest for the local governments, I think. So however we can dial in the time frame to anything you're doing, and anything peers are doing that aren't on this call that you may have some discussions with, we want to do that.
And a clarification for the goal or objective, is that to get a wired connection to all the locations, or is over the air type of connection considered acceptable as well? Or what types of carriers are included in consideration?
Right, that's a terrific question. So the speed is the thing. So 100 downstream megabits per second, 20 up. That's the minimum speed, and the preference is that it be fiber. But there are going to be locations that may not be bid on. You know, they don't have it, and somebody may not bid on that location as a fiber-based provider, or the cost may be so high, and we are working with the NTIA to establish what that threshold is. And if that particular threshold is exceeded or there's no one bidding, then other technologies can be introduced and evaluated. So the preference is fiber, but that doesn't mean that in the end, that's what would be a provider for a particular location. And some of the ones where you're talking, Steve, I think have had concerns about fixed wireless and not having the speeds. So if we were to challenge those locations, the biggest thing would be to determine if the speeds are being met. And if we could prove that they aren't being met, then they would be bid, and they would either be bid the first choice there would be fiber, but then it could still end up being wireless if it exceeded those cost thresholds, but it would still have to meet by law those speeds.
And the one location that I'm thinking of is in the middle of trees. So getting a wireless type connection there would have to be on top of a tower of some kind.
It could be I mean, I've kind of evaluated some of this when we went through some other grants. And so our first step, we have speed data. We have our own kind of a database that's anonymized data that shows what speeds are in particular locations. So if this particular location that you're talking about had a challenge and the provider came back and said, that's cool, we're actually, that's wrong, we're better than that, we then could look at our data and see if we had more data to support the challenge. If we don't, we'll have to accept that it's served despite what the end user is saying, if no data could be compelling that the NTIA would agree with us. But that's I mean, that's kind of how this all plays out, and we don't know until we actually see challenges how what we're going to get back and how we can retort it.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks all. As mentioned, Brian will be sharing with you follow-up materials, which will consolidate some FAQs, next steps, and then registration information. And this recording will be posted online as well.
I really appreciate those of you who are on the call today, and obviously you have my email. The other email on the document here, I get it as well, but you have my email, and I just want to reinforce whatever we can do to facilitate this, and that may be limited because this is all new to us too, but we want to do everything we can to help and especially get the word out and identify any locations that may be served or unserved on the map, but truly aren't served or unserved, or truly aren't served. Let's put it that way. And so we want to make sure we catch those. So if there are any other questions, great. If not, I really want to thank you for being on the call, and please look for the emails from us soon with more information.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody.